I took an online writing class through Skillshare called Erotic Writing Masterclass, and this is my review. This class was called Erotic Writing Masterclass. Write erotica for pleasure and profit. Under the teacher's name on Skillshare, it says Kapani Hart, but in the overview, she says her name is Tiffany Smith and that she writes under a pen name, Jillian Brooks. I don't know who Kapani Hart is, but she does have an Instagram account. So the class is taught over 14 videos and 9 units, and it has 6 assignments, and all of the assignments build up toward the final project. So the assignments start with creating a pen name, and they go all the way up to creating a first draft of a 4,000-word erotic fiction story. The final project is to upload a 4,000-word, ready-to-publish erotic fiction story to the Skillshare class, class references and projects website. So there were 2,113 people who took the class when I took the class, and there was only one assignment that had been submitted. There were some reviews on the website where people felt like she didn't provide enough information as far as how to write good erotic fiction, but this is not a class that is for beginning writers, I should say. It's not a class for people who need help with sentence structure or how to write a story, how to come up with an idea for a story, how to write grammatically correct sentences. This is a class that is meant for someone who has already started writing in some form or another. You don't have to be a published author to take this class, but you should at least have the writing fundamentals down. The complaints that I saw in the reviews were there wasn't enough information. Again, one was, I don't think she didn't give us information on how to teach how to write good erotic fiction. Another complaint was that the course, the way it's taught is it's over a slideshow with all of her speaking points. Everything she says is in the slideshow. And that's good for taking notes if you're going to take notes during the class. And the particular person who made that comment in the review section was a man. And I'm guessing he thought he was going to see a hot chick talking about erotica, and he was disappointed. I enjoyed the way it was taught. Her voice was very engaging. I didn't get bored. I wasn't trying to fast forward through to see if there was anything pertinent that I needed to know. Pretty much everything that was taught in this class was all something that I already knew, and that is because I have written erotic fiction previously. This is book 1 in, there are 2 books right now. It was supposed to be a 5-book series. I don't know if I'm going to continue it or not. It's not something that is really, really pulling me toward it. So it might continue, it might not. But back to the class. So the first video is the course overview, where we learn more about Tiffany Smith. She is an erotic fiction writer under the pen name Jillian Brooks. She's an English professor. She's working on her dissertation to get her doctorate in education. This video, this class was uploaded about a little more than 2 years ago, so she might be done with that stuff by now, but at the time, that's what she was doing. She has her BA and her MA in English. She's a published academic writer. She's also an aerial yoga instructor and the owner and operator of a defunct company that I won't even mention because when I looked it up, it didn't exist. The website was for sale, and her links, her email links bounced back. So She offers several resources in the class, which are super helpful. There are 7 downloads in doc and PDF form. They are worksheets for the assignments, and then there's verbs for erotic writing, which are very interesting. There is one particular word that I really had never heard of before. I mean, looking back on it now, it makes sense. If you speak Spanish, you'd probably know what it meant. But the word was lave, and it means to wash. And so I found that very interesting. And there's also an upload of some resources for erotic writers. So there's a list of publishers who publish erotic writing. So if you're a writer who wants to publish commercially through a publisher an erotic writing fiction book, there is a list of publications or publishers there. There is a to-read list, which includes the Sleeping Beauty trilogy from Anne Rice, which is actually how I my first taste of erotic fiction was the Sleeping Beauty trilogy. Great books. I think I'm actually gonna buy them again. The ones that I had were lost, so I probably will buy those again and reread them. And then, of course, a bunch of other published erotic fiction stories. There are anthologies that she has, and then there's a list of resources of books of how to write erotica if you're interested in that, or if someone taking the class is interested in that. So she does provide a lot of resources, which is super helpful. That's one of the pros of this class. Some of the cons is that since this class was uploaded 2 years ago, she doesn't respond to questions, or the teacher doesn't respond to questions. So there are a ton of questions that are in the class discussion area that don't have answers. And there are a couple of resources that she promises during her slideshow that aren't available in the resources section. She says there's a bonus section, I think it's called the bonus section, which is Unit 9, and the things that she says are there aren't there. So if you take this class and you're looking for these things that she's offering, you're not going to find them. Just be warned. But overall, I found the class useful. So let's dive into the units. Unit 1 is broken up into 4 parts, and it explains basically why erotica is erotica, what makes erotica erotica. So the first is an overview of erotica, why erotica is a billion-dollar industry, and the elements of erotica, which are what makes erotica erotica, basically. Okay. Then the second part of Unit 1 is the differences between pornography, smut, and erotica. Pornography, the definition of pornography for the Supreme Court that I learned from my journalism class is if a material appeals to a prurient interest. So that means that if it is something that is debaucherous, basically, if it's something that is debaucherous, something that you wouldn't want your mother to know you looked at, something that you wouldn't know your pastor to know you looked at, something that you wouldn't want the government to know that you looked at, it's probably pornography. Okay? It appeals to a prurient interest. And if you don't know what prurient means, there's a dictionary. So that's the definition of pornography that I remember from journalism, my journalism classes. Anyway, the third part is the genres of erotica. So she talks about, there are different genres like African American erotica, vampire erotica, horror erotica, fantasy erotica, werewolf erotica, things like that, supernatural erotica. There's cowboy erotica. There is so many different genres. And actually, if you have a favorite genre, like the only erotica that I don't think that falls into any of these categories, or the only genre of writing that I don't think falls into any of these categories, is Christian writing. And that's because for, you know, obvious reasons. But if you're a fan of crime, there is, you know, crime erotica. There are all kinds, and apparently there are new kinds popping up all the time. BDSM erotica with the, you know, the 50 Shades of Grey. That really wasn't a type of BDSM that any person who practices BDSM would even agree with, but I won't talk about, you know, that. And then creating a pen name. So the first assignment is from Unit 1, and it is to create a pen name. And she, you know, she gives you ways to create a pen name. You can use your first initial and last name, first and middle initial and last name, first initial, make up a last name, just make up a whole new name. There are lots of ways to come up with pen names, just like there are tons of ways to come up with your porn name, you know, the street you lived on and your first pet. So the second part is the length of the work. So the length of the work is whether it's a short story, a novella, or a novel. That's pretty self-explanatory. Unit 3 is character development, and that is about your characters. So of course you've got to create a character that readers want to be, or readers like, who maybe a reader wants to be best friends with. You don't want to have a character who's an asshole and that who your readers don't want to see succeed, because a lot of times people will stop reading if they don't like your characters, your main character anyway. In erotica, you have to have 2 characters that your readers are going to like, and so this talks about the need for those type of characters. She does not go into how to create these types of characters. However, she does specifically mention a few things. So she says that your characters can't be perfect. Provide them with some background, provide them with depth, and provide them with an internal dialogue. Do not make your characters shallow, ditzy, or arrogant, and don't, while you're creating these characters, don't jump around from scene to scene with the characters. So that's all she really discusses in character development. There is an assignment for Unit 3, which is a character development worksheet, and that is to help you develop your characters for your first 4,000 word story. That's the first assignment. She gives you a second assignment after she says, you know, if you need help with your character development, please contact her. Her contact information doesn't work, and she doesn't answer questions on Skillshare. So if you need help with your character development, talk to a friend or someone that you know is a writer, or shit, even talk to me and I'll help you. But she's unavailable, I guess, for the first unforeseen future as far as character development goes. But the second assignment is to complete the opening scene worksheet, which is designed to help you start your first opening scene from your first erotica story. So that assignment is pretty good. So we are on to Unit 4, which is conflict, because every story needs a conflict, right? So Unit 4 is about conflict, and in conflict, she talks about an internal conflict and an external conflict. So internal conflict is what's going on in your characters' minds. External conflict is what is basically hindering their progress, the outside world. For example, she uses Interview with a Vampire, I think, for this as an example, which is Louis. We know in love, if you've ever read or watched Interview with a Vampire. I'm an Anne Rice fan, so I read all of the Vampire Chronicles books. Louis is a perpetually tortured soul. He's tortured by his vampirism, basically. So that's his internal conflict, is that he's tortured. He's tortured because he's a vampire, and he has this guilt that is just eating at him that no other vampire feels, and that's actually his superpower in the stories. But that's his internal battle. His external battle is with Lestat and with the world. He can't go out in the sun. Lestat is always niggling at him. He gives him a child, and then the child gets taken away. Lestat makes fun of him. There's all kinds of issues between them. There's this weird dynamic, this weird unspoken sexual dynamic between them. That's the external conflict in those stories. So she talks about conflict, and of course every story needs a conflict. So again, very helpful to a person who's just starting to write erotica and who doesn't know you know, what elements are, because erotica is not just writing sex scenes, even though there's lots of that is involved in erotica, not so much in romance as erotica. There's a difference. So keep that in mind. The unit 5 is structure, and when we say structure, we don't mean sentence structure, grammatical structure. We don't mean how to compose a paragraph. Here, the structure is broken up into 2 parts. Unit 5 is. She talks about Michael, I think his name is Michael Hauge, Hauge, the 6-stage plot structure. As a resource, she offers that up and talks about, you know, it's basically like Freytag's triangle, but there's 6 points here instead of 3. And basically, it's how your story flows. So there's ebb and flow, you know, your story goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. So there's some plateaus, there's some peaks, there's some valleys. That's the structure that she's talking about. Then she talks about how to write your story. So basically here she goes into pantsing versus plotting. She discusses that if you're somebody who needs a guide for where your story's going, that you probably would want to plot your story out. And if you're someone, she calls it instinct, but it's basically pantsing. She says you can go on instinct and write your story. Basically that's pantsing. So that's basically just sitting down and writing without having much forethought into where you want your characters to go and how they're going to get there. Your mind just takes off and your story gets written. For the assignments, she offers up the first one. There's 2 assignments here. The first assignment is to complete for Unit 4, the assignment is to complete the conflict development worksheet. There's a conflict development worksheet that she offers. So that's for Unit 4. For Unit 5, our assignments are to create an outline for your story. And the second is to plot out your turning points. She talks about 5 key turning points to erotic romance. And that is where she talks about Michael Hage's 6-stage plot structure. So, you know, that didn't appeal to me to do, so I didn't do it. Actually, I didn't really do any of the assignments, to be honest. I just took the class. I didn't do the assignments because I knew that they wouldn't be answered. There would be no questions answered. And I am a pantser when I write, so I don't really plot out. I mean, I have an idea of the story I want to tell and maybe an idea of what might happen in the end and some middle parts, but I don't do much plotting. So I didn't do any of this. Unit 6 is point of view, and this is where she discusses the point of view. She says that she has an easier time writing from the first person male point of view in her erotic fiction, which is fine. I wrote mine from the first person female point of view. If you are third person, there are stories, actually the Sleeping Beauty stories are written from the third person. But it worked out that way because it's a Sleeping Beauty story, and it's not told from Beauty's perspective. It's told from an omniscient narrator's perspective. But you could write from the third person as well. I think it's easier. You can identify, I think, with your characters a little more when you're writing erotica from the first person, just because they're describing how they feel. And third person, that, you know, can happen too, but I like the first person for erotica. And then Unit 7, she talks about sex scenes. So a lot of times with sex scenes, people don't say what they mean when they're writing. They use words like, they use terms that are considered purple language. Things like quivering, throbbing member, her mounds, they say they use for breasts, all kinds of weird terms. What's another weird term that they use for body parts? Throbbing rocket, fiery dragon of his lust, things like that. things that make no sense. I mean, they might make sense to the writer in their mind when they're coming up with terms. Just use the terms, okay? Use the V word and use the P word for the male part, or you can even use the C word for a man's part, or the C word for the woman's part. But when you try to get too flowery with your verbiage, it throws off the reader, and it sounds really silly. It might make them giggle more than it will turn them on. So your goal in writing erotica is to turn people on, and imagining a fiery dragon of his lust is not going to be something that's much of a turn on, in my opinion, and in editors' opinions. There's an article about purple language that I'll actually link to in the description, so you can learn what purple language is. There is an assignment for Unit 7, and it is to write your first draft of your 4,000 word short story erotica. And by now, if you've done all the other worksheets, you should be able to do that. So that's, yes, after Unit 7, sex scenes, you must write your story. Unit 8 is publication. So she strongly suggests that if you're going to self-publish, to publish using KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. I strongly agree, because Kindle Direct Publishing does not require any upfront costs to publish. A lot of times, and she goes into this too, a lot of times what they call vanity presses and self-publishing companies are scams, are super scammy, and they charge you to publish, they charge you to do cover art, they charge you for editing. If you sign on to a publisher, and if a company, like if you're looking for a publication for, someone to publish you, and you're seeking out companies, they should never ask you for money. That should be a no-go. So if they're asking you for money, that right there should tell you that they're a scam. You don't pay for publishing. You don't pay for publishing. You don't pay for, again, covers or editing when you're working with a publication. Now, if you're self-publishing, you definitely want to hire an editor. You want to hire a proofreader, and you want to hire a copy editor or a line editor who are going to give you the notes that you need to make your story or your manuscript as good as possible before you publish. And she does provide a list of publications in that one of the resources. So again, there's always that. Just beware of scams. That's all I can say, is beware of scams, because too many people have lost money trying to publish their work, working with unscrupulous people. And Unit 9 for the win. Unit 9 is a bunch of bonus stuff. It's where she tries to get you to buy her courses or her coaching program. She offers discounts on an aerial arts class, but again, all of the things that she's offering aren't I don't think are available because the links don't work. The email doesn't work. She offers a certificate of completion for the class. You can't get it because the email bounces back. So overall, if you're going into this class to learn something about writing erotica, I believe that you would do good with this class. If you're going in expecting support from your teacher, you're not going to get it. That's the only con that I can really say about the class. The visuals are quite nice, and there are a lot of, in her slides, she's got images, and there's some, some adult imagery in the slides. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, I would give the Erotic Writing Masterclass an 8. I would give it an 8 because it does have some really good solid foundational information. But again, there is no feedback and no getting answers from the instructor, which would be helpful for some people. So I give it an 8 out of 10. It was, good solid class. So 8. Definitely an 8. It's an hour and 24 minutes well spent to learn about writing erotica if that's what you would like to do. Skillshare is not paying me to do these reviews. This is my honest opinion, and the next Skillshare class that I will be reviewing is called How to Write a Novel Step by Step. Be on the lookout for that video. And if you have any questions or, would like to give me some feedback, please drop it in the comments. I love to hear from you. And if not, I will TTYL. So until next time, yours in writing.